so fascinating and just a naturally born leader.
Thank you.
Your ascensionist into master, your ascension journey through the spirituality. Um, does that kind of go hand in hand with you starting the church, or where do those stories cross, and how did your ascension begin?
Good question. Those stories do kind of go hand in hand. However, my journey of ascension started as far back as my first childhood memory. And unfortunately, my first childhood memory would happen to be my abuse that I received sexually. Here I was, a boy born into a world that was already defined for me. And so to know that a man sleeping with another man already said that this was who I was, and that particular experience repeated itself over the span of 10 years, it was kind of like embedded in me that this is who I was. And so when I got into my relationship with my first partner that lasted for 16 years, the first 5, 6 years, I cheated on him. I developed this addiction to sex, wanting to find myself, wanting to determine whether or not I was gay or straight, whether or not I was manly enough or masculine enough. There were so many areas of redefining that I had to go through, that I wanted to go through, that it literally made me realize that the way in which I was going about it, the way in which I was trying to feed my ego or appease my sense of belonging was every bit of toxic. It was every bit of corroding and eroding the man that I was becoming. And so it was at that point in my marriage, maybe 5 or 6 years into the relationship, I wanted to commit suicide and give my life over to the divine, because I felt like what I was doing in the physical world was just so unpleasing, not only to myself, but to everyone else that was a part of my life. And that particular story, as profound as it was, the moment in which here I am deployed overseas in the desert, calling my husband on the phone and saying to him, like, I have been cheating for so many years, and like I've cheated so many times that I couldn't even begin to articulate every single event. I couldn't even begin to give him dates, times, people, places, positions, like all those things that any other partner would want to have. And so his response at that given time was every bit of what both angered me and saved me, right? Because his response was, God told me that this was going to happen and that I needed to be there for you through this. And I just cried and like I wept, and not having a mom to talk to or a dad to talk to, not having brothers to bounce it off of, it literally showed me like here I was in this world, in this life with millions and billions of people, and yet I felt alone. Yet I was alone. And so I decided to go and off myself with a rifle that was back in my tent. And along that path, that journey from the phone call to my tent, there was a chaplain officer that happened to be at least a good 200, 300 yards away that screamed from the top of his lungs to me across what felt like the base, because the base wasn't that large. And he called me and he told me like I needed to follow him, and he took me behind the church and down into this little basement hall, and he shut the door and he said, "This is where God told me to tell you to release it." And I wept and I wept. And I don't know if that chaplain officer out there remembers me, but I want to say thank you so very much for stepping in, for being obedient to the call, and like for saving me. And like, it literally changed my life. Like, I literally let every ounce of grief, of sadness, of confusion that I had on his floor, and I got myself together after about 45 minutes to an hour. I confessed everything to him. And he told me that life is meant to be good, great, and glorious, which is where this saying comes from, the good, great, and glorious. It's like every bit of my life is meant to be that way. And so I took that and I wore it with pride. I went back to that phone call and I called him back up and I apologized for how it ended and told him like every bit of me is going to fight for this. And I said to him like I want to give you all the time you need, to forgive me, to find it in your heart, to ask as many questions as you want. I said, but there will come a point in which you will say you forgive me, and at that point, I will never allow this experience to be held over my head again. Like I must heal myself as much as you too must heal from this moment, and we did.